The heat kicked on just as the sun cracked over the trees outside, humming softly through the vents. I blinked into the pale morning light filtering through the old blinds of my childhood room, the air faintly scented with cinnamon and pine. For a moment, it felt like every other Christmas morning I'd spent here, quiet, warm, expectant. I reached for my phone out of habit, not urgency. The boutique's Portland expansion was finally in motion. We'd signed the initial lease. Vendors confirmed. My numbers had been solid tight, but strong. I hadn't opened my accounts in a few days. The holidays had a way of loosening my grip. Just for a breath. The banking app took a second longer to load than usual rural Wi-Fi. I tapped in my passcode, let my thumb hover, then pressed down. The screen flickered once, then it settled. Balance, 0 points, wow. I blinked, waited. Maybe it hadn't refreshed. I swiped down. Again, still 0. I opened the business account, 0. The savings, 0. Even the emergency line I rarely touched showed nothing. My chest tightened. At first, I thought it was a glitch, a sync error, something stupid, but my hands were already shaking. I checked the transaction logs, dozens of outgoing transfers, scheduled in perfect sequence. No alerts, no warnings, all marked as verified from a known device. I hadn't logged in since the 23rd. The log said the device used was familiar, recognized. It wasn't me. It was someone in this house. I sat still, below me. I could hear footsteps in the kitchen, the scrape of a chair, a drawer opening. The scent of fresh coffee drifted under the door. I pulled on a sweatshirt, slid into my slippers, and opened the door. The hallway was lit with soft garland lights. Holiday music trickled in from the living room. Everything looked the same, but the number in my head wouldn't leave. $150,000. Gone. The kitchen was warm, loud with the usual clatter of Christmas morning. My mother stood at the stove humming along to some jazzy version of Let It Snow while stirring a pan of scrambled eggs. The scent of cinnamon rolls drifted from the oven. At the table, Mason was already seated, scrolling through his phone with one hand, sipping coffee with the other. "Morning," I said, sliding into my seat across from him. He looked up, flashed a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You look like hell." I ignored it. "I need to tell you both something," I said. My voice was calm, maybe too calm. "Last night, someone emptied all of my accounts. Business, personal, everything. $150,000. Mason didn't flinch. My mother turned slightly. "Wooden spoon mid-stir." "Gone," she echoed. "Gone," I said. "Transferred out around 1:30 in the morning. From a known device, one that's logged under my profile." Mason leaned back in his chair, stretching. He tilted his head to the side and gave me that slow, familiar smirk, the one he always used when he thought he was smarter than everyone else in the room. "Prove it. Ms. CEO?" My mother laughed, but it was uneasy. She turned back to the stove. "Sweetheart, it's Christmas. Maybe it's just a system thing. A delayed posting. You've been under a lot of stress lately." "I checked the logs," I said, eyes still on Mason. It wasn't a glitch. He raised an eyebrow, then went back to scrolling his phone. Unconcerned. "You're probably just tired. Happens when you mix ambition with too many spreadsheets." I didn't answer him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I sat perfectly still and watched him. Every shift, every twitch, every sip of coffee. That smirk was all the confirmation I needed, and the fact that our mother didn't say a word to him that was confirmation. 2. I used to tell myself he'd grow out of it. When I was 15, I bought my first phone with money I earned babysitting twins across the street. It wasn't fancy, just a blue flip phone with tiny silver stars I'd painted on the back. I was proud of it, until it vanished 3 days before my birthday. I tore through every drawer, checked the garbage, even lifted the couch cushions twice. My mom said I probably misplaced it. A week later, I saw it sitting on Mason's dresser. Same stars, same smudge near the hinge. I picked it up, turned it over. A different SIM card. He walked in as I stood there holding it. "You went through my stuff," he asked. "That's mine." "No, it's not. You're confused." He didn't yell. He didn't get defensive. He just dismissed me like I was stupid. And when Mom found out, she told me I was probably just tired and overreacting. "Your brother wouldn't steal from you." She said, "You probably left it in his room." The next year, we did a science fair together. I built the entire project design, research, poster board. He showed up the morning of and slapped his name across the front. When we won, he gave the speech. We worked really hard. He said, junior year? He convinced me to co-sign a phone contract for him just to build credit. I didn't even make it to the third billing cycle before the missed payments started. When the collection calls came, he said they were overreacting. It's just a couple $100. Don't be dramatic. Every time. I forgave. Every time. I thought it was the last time, but it wasn't. It was always him pushing the line, taking what wasn't his, rewriting the story while I bit my tongue. He wasn't new to this. I was just late to admitting it. And now, sitting at my childhood kitchen table, watching him sip my mother's coffee from a holiday mug and scroll through his phone like nothing had happened, I knew this wasn't the first betrayal. It was just the most expensive one. And it wouldn't be the last unless I stopped pretending. I climbed the stairs slowly, holding my breath with each step like I was walking into a crime scene that hadn't been taped off yet. My room was still as I'd left it, throw blanket folded at the edge of the bed, charger plugged in, my laptop resting neatly on the desk like it hadn't been touched. But I knew better. I sat down, powering it on. The login screen blinked awake, waiting. I hadn't opened it since arriving 2 days ago. My work was supposed to wait until after the holidays. That had been the plan. Family first. A break. A chance to breathe. I tapped in my password and watched the desktop bloom into view. Everything looked untouched, no windows open, no recent files showing in the sidebar. I should have felt relief. Instead, I leaned forward and examined the machine more closely. The power cord was plugged into the right side port. I never used that one. It was loose. Temperamental. I always chose the left. I reached around to unplug it and felt something cold and unfamiliar. My fingers wrapped around a small silver USB drive, barely visible, wedged into the back port. It had a clear cap and a faint smudge along the edge lipstick. Maybe coral pink. Not mine. I stared at it for a second too long, then slid it free and plugged it into my older laptop, the backup I always traveled with but rarely touched. The folders looked empty at first, but I knew where to look. I opened the drive's metadata. Created 1:34 a.m. December 25, modified 1:36 a.m. Device name, Talbot Core, my laptop network local. Private IP location. Inside this house, there it was. Quiet, undeniable. I took screenshots of everything, saved a copy to my encrypted drive. Then I opened Signal and forwarded the images to Thane. Me needs you to pull shadow data off this drive. Timestamp confirms access from my system while I was asleep. Thane, got it. Don't touch anything else. Back it all up. I'll scrape what I can. I stared at the screen for a long time after the message came through. The room felt quieter than it had earlier. Not peaceful, just still, like the kind of quiet that comes after something breaks. Not before. I backed up everything, then sat back in the chair. Numb. It wasn't just the money. It was how confident he'd been that no one would notice, that no one would stop him, that I wouldn't. By the time I came back downstairs, the living room had been transformed into the usual post-breakfast chaos, gift wraps scattered like fallen leaves, empty coffee cups on every flat surface, carols drifting lazily from the speaker in the corner. My cousins were laughing over matching pajamas. My aunt was taking blurry photos no one would ever print. And in the middle of it all sat my mother, smiling like she'd already forgotten everything I'd said. Mason stepped forward with a small box in his hand. velvet blue with a silver ribbon. "For you," he said. Voice light. "Practiced. Wanted to get you something timeless." She took it with a delighted gasp. The kind only mothers can do when their favorite child is performing generosity in front of an audience. She opened the lid slowly. Inside, nestled in satin, was a delicate sapphire teardrop necklace. I stopped breathing for half a second. It was the same one. The same design I'd bookmarked 3 weeks ago after signing the lease for the Portland expansion. I'd saved it in a folder labeled after launch. Gift for Mom. I hadn't bought it yet, wanted to wait until the contract was finalized, wanted to attach it to something meaningful. A moment earned. Now it sparkled in her palm as she lifted it, tears already blooming in the corners of her eyes. "Mason. It's beautiful. You didn't have to." He shrugged, flashing his modest hero smile. "You deserve nice things." She reached forward, wrapped her arms around him, and kissed his cheek. "You're such a good son." I stood completely still, watching the whole thing like someone observing their own memory get rewritten in real time. I didn't need to ask where he got the idea or the money. I knew. Of all the things he could have bought, he chose that necklace, that design, that moment. It wasn't enough to take the money. He wanted to take the intention, to hand over something I dreamed of giving and claim it as his own. My hands stayed at my sides. My expression didn't change. But inside, something quiet and sharp twisted a little deeper. This was what he always did. He didn't just erase lines, he signed his name over them, recast the scene, changed the script, gave himself the final line while I faded into the background, and everyone around him let it happen. My mother held the necklace against her collarbone, beaming, asking someone to help clasp it. I turned away before I was asked to. Back upstairs. I shut the door, sat on the bed, and opened my laptop again. The screenshots were still there, the timestamps, the logs, the drive metadata. So was the weight in my chest, but it was changing, no longer just shock. Now it felt like evidence. The email came in just after lunch. A subject line I didn't think twice about: updated lease agreement final draft attached. It was from my real estate attorney in Portland. Routine. We'd been ironing out the final clauses for weeks. I assumed it was a confirmation. A small piece of good news in a day that had given me nothing but silence and smirks. I clicked it open. Everything looked right at first: same address, same terms, same square footage. I scanned through quickly, half out of habit, until I got to the signature page. Owner Charge Operator M. Talbot Holdings. LLC signed Mason Talbot. Date December 24th. I blinked, then blinked again. It wasn't a typo. His name was there, typed cleanly where mine should have been. A fabricated LLC I'd never heard of before, using our last name but not my credentials. I opened the edit history. His email was listed as the last modifier. I didn't need a second opinion. He hadn't just touched my money. He'd gone further, reaching into the next chapter of my life, the one I'd worked for, the one I hadn't even lived yet, and he'd started rewriting it in his name. I stared at the screen, not moving. For a minute, I couldn't feel my hands. Then I opened the folder on my desktop and created a new one. Case initiated, into it. I dropped the PDF, then the metadata screenshots, then the photos of the USB, the lipstick smudge, the login times. I copied the signal thread with Thane and saved the camera footage timestamp logs I'd already begun requesting from my backup drive. I labeled everything, cross-referenced, built a timeline. It felt like a ritual, like preparing for something sacred or terrible. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't even curse his name. I just worked, because this wasn't about a lease anymore. It was about proof, pattern, intent. He wanted the storefront, the name, the credit, the power. And I knew then, with a certainty I hadn't let myself believe before, that he wouldn't stop until everything I built had his name etched over mine. I closed the file, sat back, and stared at my reflection in the dark laptop screen. The next time he looked at me, I wouldn't be the quiet one. I'd almost forgotten I packed it. Tucked beneath a rolled-up scarf in the bottom of my bag was the mini-cam I'd used in the back office of the boutique during a string of late-night inventory thefts. Motion activated, time-stamped, discreet. I'd meant to install it at the new Portland location after the holidays. But now it felt like I'd brought it here for a different reason. I plugged it into my backup laptop and waited. The files loaded slowly. Each clip was 5 seconds unless motion had been detected. I scanned the thumbnails until I found the one I needed, December 25th. 1:31 a.m. The room flickered to life. Grainy footage, slightly angled, but clear enough. Mason, wearing one of Mom's robes, his hair pushed back, moving with ease. No hesitation, no sign of guilt. He sat at my desk, opened my laptop, plugged in a USB, the same one I'd pulled from the port that morning. He typed fast, like he'd done it before. Then he leaned back, smirked at the screen, and left. No audio, no shadows, no mystery, just fact. I paused the video and let the silence stretch around me. This wasn't paranoia. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft. Deliberate, rehearsed, confident. I picked up my phone and called Thane. He answered on the second ring. "You okay?" "No," I said, "but I have it. Footage, timestamp matches. It's him." He didn't respond right away. "Then we're moving forward." I nodded, forgetting he couldn't see me. "Yes. Start drafting the timeline. I'm done waiting. Copy that. Back up everything again. I'll prep an encrypted folder." I ended the call and turned back to the laptop, letting the video loop once more. Mason's smirk didn't sting this time. It clarified. He thought I'd freeze. He didn't expect me to record him doing it. I copied the clip to the evidence folder and labeled it Primary Footage, 1:31 a.m. Entry, plus USB. Then I closed the laptop and let the room fall dark again. There was no going back now. The table was quieter than usual. Most of the family had gone home. The wrapping paper cleared. The music dialed down. It was just the three of us now, me, Mason, and Mom eating what was left of the holiday roast, surrounded by the kind of silence that isn't peaceful, just dense. I cut a piece of sweet potato, set down my fork, and let my voice stay calm. "I've been thinking a lot about boundaries lately," I said. Mason didn't look up. He kept buttering his roll. "About how easy it is to cross a line when you think no one's watching," I continued, "and how some people take things just because they believe no one will stop them." He froze for half a second, barely noticeable. But I caught it. Mom reached for the gravy, eyes still on her plate. "You're always so serious this time of year," she said lightly. "I think I've just finally learned how to see things for what they are." Mason looked up then. Slow and measured. "Still spiraling over your spreadsheets," I smiled, not the kind that gave anything away. "No, just realizing the difference between a mistake and a pattern." He didn't reply, didn't smirk, just went back to eating. Slower this time. Mom cleared her throat. "Can we not do this tonight?" I nodded once, still watching Mason. The air between us had changed, not by much, but enough. He felt it, the shift, the quiet that didn't come from retreat, but from readiness. He couldn't tell what I had, but he knew I had something. And for the first time, he didn't look so sure of himself. I finished my plate in silence and stood to clear it, hearing my own heartbeat steady and strong in my ears. The game had already started. He just hadn't realized he wasn't the only one playing. It happened just after 10. I was in the kitchen rinsing a glass when the knock came firm. Deliberate. No hesitation. 3 seconds later, it came again. Mason glanced up from the living room, brows furrowed. Mom was in her robe, slippers shuffling across the tile as she made her way to the front door. I followed. When she opened it, 2 officers stood outside. One held a clipboard. The other rested a hand lightly on his belt. Is Mason Talbot present? The taller one asked. Mom blinked. I'm sorry, we have a warrant. Financial fraud, wire transfer abuse. We need to speak with him immediately. Mason stepped into the foyer, his usual grin halfway formed before it faltered. What's this about? He asked, voice still casual, but thinner now. I stepped forward and handed over the folder documents, screenshots, timestamps, footage, everything labeled, cataloged, ready. He used my device. I said, he forged my lease, accessed my accounts. The details are inside. Mason stared at me, color draining fast. You're serious. The officer took the folder without a word, flipping through the first few pages. Then he turned to Mason. We'll need you to come with us. Now. Mom's mouth opened, then closed again. Her eyes shifted between us like she'd stumbled into a scene she couldn't rewrite. Mason, she said, voice cracking. Tell them this is a mistake. He didn't answer. He didn't look at her. Just let them guide him out the door and down the steps in silence. She turned to me, eyes glassy, jaw tight. But there was no apology in her face, only betrayal. As if I was the one who'd broken something. I didn't speak. I didn't explain. I just watched the door close behind him. The morning we opened. The sun cut clean through the front windows, lighting every corner of the space I had imagined for years. Reclaimed wood shelves lined the walls. The checkout counter sat beneath a hand-painted sign that read, "Third Thread." It was quiet. No ribbon cutting, no press. Just me, unlocking the door and turning the sign to open. I didn't invite anyone from home. I didn't need them there. The quote hung behind the counter in a small glass frame, my father's handwriting. Faded, but sure. You don't have to scream to be powerful. It reminded me of the grocery lists he used to leave, the birthday notes tucked into coat pockets, the kind of voice that didn't shout. But stayed. I hadn't heard from Mason since the arrest. No calls, no messages. His lawyer reached out once. I forwarded everything to Thane. The case moved forward without me needing to show up again. Mom sent one text the week after he was taken. You went too far. I didn't answer. Some people don't grieve the loss of a relationship. They grieve the loss of the role they played in keeping you small. I didn't miss her voice. I had my own now. The door opened. A customer stepped inside, looking up at the shelves, the soft green walls, the quiet welcome of the space. I smiled and stood tall behind the counter. She didn't know the story, but the name on the lease was mine.